Well, it's now 10:30 and it's Thursday, and that means it's time for brainstorming the human connection brought to you by the South Dakota Humanities Council. And this is an interactive program. That means, oh, my name is Lawrence Diggs, by the way. I'm the inquisitor here. And it's going to be a very interesting conversation. And it's something that it has a topic that is coming up gradually more and more, probably because people live longer now. So they used to die of infection before they got to this point. But now, as we live longer, we have new challenges to our health because we live longer. And as we live longer, we'll have more challenges. But this is a challenge that people are trying to meet, and that is Alzheimer's and dementia. And we have two very interesting guests who are working directly with this kind of problems, because there are many that's wrapped up in the same two issues. And there are a lot of issues that are connected with it tangentially. But we're going to have a conversation, and I hope that all of you will be able to join in this conversation, because it is a conversation more than a few talking heads. It's about what you have to bring to the conversation, your experiences, your questions, your comments, your insights. It's crowdsourcing data and crowdsourcing ideas from all of us, rather than looking for all of the solutions from a few of us. My guest today is Yoko, known as better as Tenyoh Sugawara, and she is an artist who has focused her art on exploring the issues of dementia, and in particular, Alzheimer's. Okay. And also we have with us the executive director of the Alzheimer's Association here in South Dakota, and that's Leslie Morrow. And welcome, Tenyoh and Leslie.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Okay. Well, let's first start off by learning a little bit more about you. Tenyoh, can you tell us a little bit more about like where you're from, where you're living, and how you came to choose these topics for your art? By the way, we will be looking at some of her art a little later.
Okay. Yes. I'm originally from Japan, and Rapid City has been my home for over 20 years. And I am a nurse turned ceramic sculptor. If that's good enough? Oh, and my latest series on dementia was first started with my former art teacher, and we did a joint exhibit 2 years ago. And now the same series is shown at the Washington Pavilion in Sioux Falls.
Okay, we'll come back and dig deeper into that. Leslie, tell us where you're from and something about your background and what you do.
Sure. Well, hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I've really been looking forward to this opportunity for months, so it's great that it's finally happening. As Lawrence said, I'm the executive director of the South Dakota Chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. I'm in my 11th year in this role, and I'm originally from northeastern Nebraska, about an hour and a half from Sioux Falls, but I've lived here since 2004 and worked in the media for about 15 years before switching to the nonprofit sector, and am as passionate about the work that I do today as I ever have been in a previous chapter of my life. So like I said, just excited to hear from you all and to share a little bit about maybe some potential resources that could be helpful to you as well.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about what the Alzheimer's Association does. What is that?
Sure. So we are there to walk with anyone that is impacted by this disease in any way, whether they are the ones thinking they have Alzheimer's or another form of dementia, whether they have a diagnosis or not, if they're a caregiver, if they go to church with someone and they just want to be a better friend, they have a question, they know that it's impacting friends and neighbors and they want to know a little bit more. We are there to provide care and support, but mostly we are there to make sure that no one has to navigate this disease alone. The Alzheimer's Association has chapters all over the country, about 78 of them, but as a part of that whole organization, we are also the largest nonprofit funder of Alzheimer's research in the world, behind only the US and the Chinese government. So we are walking with people in the trenches while also keeping an eye to the future and funding that research that we're seeing great results so far, and we know will eventually lead to better treatments for this disease.
A lot of times we focus on the victims of these diseases, and rightly so. I mean, they're the eye of the storm, so to speak. But also there are people who are caretakers. I understand you guys help those caretakers as well. Can you talk about that work?
Absolutely. I think arguably this disease, more than any other, perhaps, the brunt of it falls often on their care partner, their caregiver. And this means family and friends that are providing care, perhaps before they go into long-term care facilities, if that's a part of that journey. And so, yes, it is, you imagine a disease that can last anywhere from 2 to 20 years, and how that caregiver eventually is responsible for many of the day-to-day activities that one did before they were impacted by this disease. So it takes a huge toll. It takes a toll physically. 40% of caregivers actually with this disease actually pass away before their loved one living with the disease. So that really tells you how hard this journey can be without support, and oftentimes even with support. It is difficult to watch a loved one, to endure some of the specific nuances that come with this disease, and physically as well. A lot of times their own health goes to the back burner because they're so busy caring for this other person living with Alzheimer's or another dementia. So we of course provide care and support groups. We have trained staff in our office. We have a 24/7 helpline that is available to people in the middle of the night if they just are at their wits' end and need to vent to someone. We have, which is a great resource no matter where you live in South Dakota. We do cover all 66 counties in South Dakota. Everything's at no cost. I forgot to mention that. But at a higher level, we know that respite, that break that people can have from caregiving is so important. So even our advocacy work, we go to peer, we successfully advocated for $2 million in adult day funding to get more respite programs, those adult day programs available to people, because those are the lifelines when people are really on this journey and struggling with caregiving.
Mm-hmm. Tenyoh, you have been doing art, and that's ostensive. You know, that's really how this program came about. Is Tenyoh's art that she currently has on display or exhibit at the Washington Pavilion. And I became acquainted with and interested in her work a while ago, but I noticed that you are focused in your art on this problem of dementia and Alzheimer's. Can you talk about how you got involved and how you turned, other than you are a nurse, what got you turned toward this particular disease process in terms of art?
It's not that exciting, but I was given the opportunity for a show, and I approached my former art teacher. I'm going to use a pseudonym here, Daisy, and she wanted to do a joint exhibit with me. And she was then struggling with increasing forgetfulness. And we decided right then the short theme will be what she's been struggling with. That is dementia.
Mm-hmm. And so it's from that particular meeting that was your door into using art to talk about this particular disease process.
Yes, and I'm interested in, it's the subject matters. I worked with AIDS patient and I expressed how the AIDS patient went through, and then the next one is the Pine Ridge, and those images are really interest to me. So dementia was right into the subject line that I've been working with.
Mm-hmm. I've always thought that art should be about communication, and communicating something that's useful to people is better than just this sort of blanket communication. What kinds of things are you interested in communicating through art about these disease processes?
For me, use my art as a window to reflect upon, maybe, of how you feel, what you're going through. And also, like in dementia cases, you are not alone in that dementia journey. And make them realize that I feel great if I could. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How do you approach translating what you learn from interacting with people who are victims of these diseases? How do you approach translating their experience to the rest of us through art?
It's difficult. I don't really consider them victims, but rather they are taking life's journey. Mm-hmm. And I watch them, how this, it's we, all of us, go through ups and downs of life. And we learn to face it ideally positively. And I'll just observe it, what they go through, and kind of think about it. What would be the best way to show what I've just witnessed? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm not the best at describing.
Yeah, I think that was pretty good, actually. Leslie, let's turn back to the and we'll be bouncing back and forth a bit here. It's kind of like how you close one eye and open the other eye, and you're looking at the same thing, but it looks a little bit different. Let's talk about the work that you do. What are you trying to accomplish as an organization?
Well, obviously, first and foremost, we want to have better treatments and ultimately a cure for this disease. So we can just kind of set that over on the side. So that's a huge part of, we are a nonprofit. You probably have seen fundraisers. A chunk of what we do is trying to fund that and to find donors that will help us join in that science. And as I said, it's a terribly exciting time for that. But one of the things, what's so great about sitting on this call and being with Tenyoh is that what she's trying to accomplish through her art really coincides with what we're trying to do every day at the association. Stigma is a huge part of this disease. It's a barrier to people seeking support because they are embarrassed about what they or their loved one is experiencing. They're worried about what the public will feel about them. It's not a mental health issue, so to speak. It's a disease issue, but it comes with some of those same barriers that we see in the mental health space, which is that, people don't understand that if it's a behavior, it's because of a change that's happening in their brain. And that, like Tenyoh said, it is a part of their life journey, and that we can't just lock them away and be embarrassed and not seek support for ourselves as caregivers or for that loved one. And so a lot of what we do is raising awareness about the disease, dispelling myths about the disease, helping people better understand it, and then also helping them to be a better caregiver or a better friend, all those things that we talked about. So that's a huge chunk. And, when we see exhibits like Tenyoh's, it shines a light on it. It makes it okay for people to better understand it. And that's a part of it is fear. I think you and I talked about this when we were at the Washington Pavilion, Lawrence, is that, when we fear something, we'll just throw up blinders and barriers, and we don't even know what we don't know. And so that's a huge part, I think, of talking about it and helping people understand it. And then once you have a better idea of how to talk to your neighbor when he asks your name 5 times or tells you the same story, how to feel comfortable in that and understand that we are on a journey together and that we can meet him where he is, man, it's a game changer when it comes to this disease.
Talk to us about how you do that. How do and like the process of how do people come to you? How do you discover that they need the help? And then how do you approach giving them that help?
And it's a great question, because it's not a one-sided situation. I can't swoop in, or our volunteers can't swoop in to a family or a community and make them open to it, or even make them open to changing how they behave, things like that, as a caregiver, a friend, those kinds of things. So you do the best you can. But again, I think so what we do is really get down to basics. We start from the very beginning. I think the most common question we get, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? We talk about that. We talk about the different forms of dementia. We help, but really, I think one of the key things, if there was one thing that I would share with people, and you heard me talk about this the night at the opening, it is the need to meet people where they are. And as with brains that aren't impacted by Alzheimer's and dementia, when we hear something that's not right, a mistake, our gut instinct is to correct it, let's make it right. And when your mother is telling you she can't figure out where your father is and he's been gone for 8 years, our gut instinct is to remind her, well, Mom, Dad died. Mm-hmm. But for her, she's reliving that death every time you tell her. So it's probably better just to say, you know what, I think he ran out to run an errand. He'll be here later. Why don't we come over here and watch Wheel of Fortune or something like that? And so I think that is how we do it. We try to just provide really real life, hands-on ways for them to see things a little differently and to understand that that person impacted by this disease is doing the very best that they can. It's not a 3-year-old that you can train not to touch the hot oven. It's different. And I think once we start just kind of explaining very basic things and making little tweaks, it really can make a big difference in how we approach this disease.
Right. We will come back to your journey as a person who's trying to help all of us cope better with this disease process. But I want to go back to Tenyoh's work. And I think people will have a better idea of the power of her work if we can actually see it. So Tenyoh, can we maybe take a look at? Okay, here we go.
Yes.
So can you tell us what we're looking at?
So Kobe will start. So first one is when Daisy, my former art teacher, and I collaborated for a joint exhibit 3.5 years ago. She had been just diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it was during the COVID period. And the doctor's appointments are done online. And her questions to her doctor was written on a notebook over 2 pages. And she practiced reading them aloud so that she would not miss asking them. So this particular image was inspired by this. So Kobe, could you turn next, please? So I'm going to read the accompanying text so people can kind of see and feel at the same time. So every one of us is on a boat of life. At some point, we all must stop rowing, letting the current take us. Next, please. The uncertainty is sometimes terrifying. it is especially so for those who have been recently diagnosed with dementia. Next. Daisy's handwritten question to her doctor are inscribed in her own words on this canoe. Some of them are, next. Talk to me about how I go away. How fast? Next. Alzheimer's? Next. Would I get difficult? I do not want to be nasty to my family. Next. Know my family. How does that go away? Do I not know them? Next. Can I ask to be euthanized? The blanket holds the words family, friends, smile, reaching out, and compassion. They will be her warmth, no matter how far she drifts. I would like to hear your reactions or dementia-related experiences inspired by this first image. But I would like to share one more quick story that expresses the fear of uncertainty triggered by dementia. The photo is from my joint exhibit with Daisy. A young woman came to see it with her grandfather. After viewing the show, she, with a smile through tears, approached the gallery director and said, "My grandpa was recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I was so scared of losing him to the disease. But this show somehow gave me courage." She did not articulate what gave her courage. I'm hoping it was because of her realization that she was not alone in her fear. I'm passing the microphone to Lawrence.
Yes, I would like to take this opportunity to get some feedback from our esteemed guests who have joined us in this program. What's your reactions to Tenyoh's work and also the information that Leslie has been sharing with us? Betty?
Yes, good morning.
Oh,
I have a lot of familiarity with caregiving and Alzheimer's, both in my work and in my family. What Leslie said about getting into where the person is who asks you a question that you try to correct, that's such a natural impulse to do that. When I worked in the nursing home, people would come to visit family. Some were my family and others, and they just go in wanting to make pleasant conversation, and usually the first thing they say might be, "Well, what did you have for breakfast this morning?"
Yeah, right.
And
How would I
put,
know? I don't know.
the person who receives that, like my father at the time, that really put him on the spot, because he had no blamed idea what time of day it was or anything. He was just happy to see his son or whoever had walked in the door. So much better to come in and say something nice about what it's like outdoors today, or you're looking pretty chipper or something, anything other than ask them a question. Give them an answer, not a question. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
I don't guess I have anything other that's really pertinent, but I'm so glad that we're having this conversation today. It's vital for everyone.
Well, one of the things that struck me, Betty, as you were talking, is that as human beings, when we get into a new situation, we don't have a pattern for, it's hard to know what to do, because we do almost everything on patterns. We learn a pattern and we learn pattern recognition for designing what we call reality. And if something doesn't fit in the pattern that we have established, then it's really hard for us to make sense of it. And if we are afraid to test or try to design a new pattern, by trying to look and see, well, what things seem to make a pattern here? What am I learning, or what can I learn from others, like this conversation that we're having? We don't really have a way to know what we need to know or to find out. So these kinds of conversations, while we're talking specifically today about dementia and Alzheimer's, they really reach into other kind of cognitive deficits that we can be aware of and at least know about them, even if we don't have a solution. Coley, I didn't forget you. Did you have something to say?
Well, I did actually. I had a question for Tenyoh. What is the medium that you're using for your sculptures? Is it wood?
That I'm a ceramic sculptor, so it's mostly ceramic clay. And reflective surface you saw was wood and acrylic sheet.
Wow, they're just absolutely stunning. My name's Colleen Leipsch, and I'm a public speaker and an author, but I have a program called Meeting My 4-Year-Old Mother, and it addresses so many of these things. It's so interesting to hear the commonality in the beginning, this stage. And Leslie, I'm a little curious on your opinions about this. First off, I have to say thank you so much for the work that you do. It is invaluable. Our family has been supporters for years and will always continue to be. When our mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, she waited a while to tell us because she was embarrassed about it. And then it became the deer in the headlights stage. And that's the stage that was, for me personally, the most difficult stage to get through because she was scared. I knew she was scared, but anything that I told her wasn't retainable. And so it was just, constantly reminding her of, you're going to be fine. It's okay. You're safe. We're going to make sure that everything's okay. You can do whatever you want to today. But that's an area that I personally feel like I could have really done more in those early stages to relieve those fears. And I don't know what some options would be. We did leave some notes and things like that, but they would get misplaced. Leslie, what are some experiences you have with how people can remind their loved one that they're safe in those early stages?
Well, a lot of what I would say you've already said and you are doing. So kudos to you for what you did do. I had an aunt, just lost her actually to this disease, and she went through that stage too my uncle was with her. So for her, it was physical touch. She needed to feel touched a lot. And I don't mean that, I mean it just in an appropriate way, that to her was very consoling. And so that even if they were in the store or walking in anywhere, she stuck to him like glue. But even for us, if we would touch her arm, because she very much still knew familiar faces and those kinds of things. So it wasn't off-putting. Now that gets to be a dicey piece of advice if they don't remember you anymore and someone is touching them that they're not comfortable with. If you know that they know you and they're comfortable, you could feel that too, you'll know. But I said that would be one other thing that I would mention is that soothing touch. And again, I always mention would all be different if we had dementia. This disease would not look the same for any of us because we're all different right now. And so there's no hard and fast rule for anything. Someone in my office lost her mother to younger onset, and she was very touchy. Loved to give hugs and things like that to her kids and to her friends and family. And so that still remained even after the disease took hold. That was something that could always calm her down. So I say that knowing that for your loved one, for yours, Colleen, it sounds perhaps that would have been something that might have helped. For others, it may not. But that is one option. I think that we are humans, and the vast majority of us, that comforts us when we know. But again, reminding that they're safe, that we love you. We're right here. You're never going to be alone, Mom. We are here with you. And again, what that means changes through the stages and how they're able to access that information. But I kudos again to you because it really sounds like you did good work there.
Well, thank you so much for that. It's a hard disease to deal with. One thing that I'm curious about, just from a biological standpoint, it seemed to be common that victims of what my mom was going through were terrified of water. Is that a commonality?
You know, that's the first I've heard of it. I know a lot of people don't like to get in the shower or have their hair washed. So we work with families a lot of times on how to make that a little bit easier. And sounds like Betty has a lot of information too from working in long-term care. I haven't heard that specifically, but I'll tuck it away and think about it, because I always make that distinction between they become childlike almost, but they are not children. We don't want to, have them lose that dignity of that they are still grown men and women. But I don't know if because water maybe if that's more of when they revert back, if that would be something. But like I said, I'll keep that in mind. That's the first I thought of it.
Thank you so much.
Vicky, you were going to try to say something?
Yes. I looked up your artwork on Google, and I thought it was more large scale. I thought it was bigger for some reason. But when I saw it on the screen here, even though I thought it was bigger, I love the texture of the clay. First of all, it reminded me of how rough caregiving is, and it was a little bit porous. And well, I don't know, it's just the materials, the clay, and it wasn't particularly smoothed out, which reminds me so much of sickness and the roughness. It's really tough managing people who are sick. But then when I saw it in a smaller scale, I love the reflection of the boat, and it looks like a black shiny material. And to me, that reminded me of death. And against the clay, there's such a contrast, and they're floating on death. They will disappear into the black water. It looks like it's black, like onyx or something like that. And it's so beautifully done. I'm not sure I described your materials very well, but they were very effective. I used to work at a big museum, and so I was really taken back when I looked at them, and I thought it was so descriptive. I think that you've done a very good job. Very good.
Thank you.
Anyone else have something to add to our conversation? Well, let's continue the conversation, and let's talk about the practical things, some of the things we've started to explore about how the rest of us can view these deteriorating abilities. Leslie?
That's wide open, isn't it?
Oh yeah, there's a lot there.
I think one of the things that I try to keep in mind, even with my own family members that I've lost to the disease, I think even though everything, and I'm sure Colleen can talk about this more, having been through the journey, sometimes it feels like everything that you knew and loved about that person has been stripped away at the end, maybe. But I think I really try to remind myself that that is not true. That how they express themselves, how they look, how all the things that we thought were wrapped up and made that person whole, those may have been moved around, stripped, however, they may look different. But ultimately, that person is still in there. And we've heard so many stories. We hear about the power of music and how that brings people back and moments of clarity and things like that. And I just really urge people, I think, even when it may feel, I've heard so many stories, even among my own family, where folks won't go visit if they're in long-term care, maybe in very late stage dementia. And it's hard. I'm not trying to say it is not hard to go and walk with your loved one when it's that late, but there is always value to that. And I think, they may not remember your face, they may not remember your name, any of it. But if you walk in with a smile, they will go, oh, I don't know that person. but that smile makes me feel good. And that I know. And I think those are the things that we have to cling to when it's very late in the stage. And maybe they don't even open their eyes anymore, but maybe you hold your mom's hand unlike anybody else. And those are the kinds of things that I think I get emotional talking about it, because I just really feel strongly in that the essence of that person, no matter how it looks on the outside, is still there. And I think when we think of it that way, it helps us approach the disease no matter what stage that they're in. We have to remember, I tell this story all the time about someone who, he was a longtime seed corn salesman. And so he would go out to different farmers and he would sell them their seed, their corn for the season. And he always started every conversation by shaking their hand, not uncommon for where we live. He got into long-term care, and the CNAs would come in and they had struggled so much with trying to care for him. And his son one day came in and said, you know what, why don't you try before you do anything and ask him to do anything, reach out your hand and shake his hand. And I talked about a game changer. That was a game changer. That CNA didn't have to sit for hours and hours of training. She had to learn one thing that pertained specifically to him. And we really advocate for that for people when they have a loved one in long-term care. Tell their caregivers about him, what does she love? Again, my staffer who had her mom in long-term care, she told him that she loves physical touch, like on her shoulders and things like that. And those are the things that when we talk about person-centered care, another thing that we're really advocating for, that's what we're talking about. And I think, just really getting to the heart of the person and what resonates with them is so important.
How can we learn those kind of skills? I mean, most of us learn our interpersonal skills through something loosely referred to as science of mind. You know, we look at like how we feel and imagine that, what we want and how we feel about something, how we see the universe. We just imagine that the other person is seeing the same thing, even though reasonably we know that's never the case, but that's all we got. So we work from that point. However, something that feels so different as these disease processes, we may not have anything to grasp on to hold on, or a place we may not know a place to start. How would you suggest that we start that journey of finding out?
Well, I think I go back to a conversation I heard back in around 2021 when there was a lot of civil unrest and people trying to extend an olive branch and get things figured out. And someone shared the best way to bridge this gap when we are a nation divided or a world divided, whatever the case may be, is to sit down with somebody who doesn't look like you and learn about their road. The same is true when it comes to this. I feel like, we probably all know someone who's caregiving right now. Now, that caregiver might not want to take you into the weeds of how hard their journey is, but maybe it would provide an outlet for that person, and it would be good for them to know that someone does recognize, I see you. I see how hard this is. I think even one person's journey with the disease or how that road looks helps us better understand it. I preface that also by there are a lot of caregivers who also don't exactly know. I mean, James talked about too that what did he say? It was a huge unknown. So those caregivers don't have all the answers either. They're trying to figure it out every day. But I do think it opens up a way to, my end point is to just seek information, try to get a better handle on it, whether it's in your community, whether it's online. Colby was so kind to put up our website, but there is some awesome information on our website, little videos that you can little trainings almost that you can just sit and watch. People living with the disease, caregivers are giving their perspective on it. So that in itself helps people better understand. But I think the only way around it is to seek it out, to seek more information. Probably not the answer you were hoping for, Lawrence.
Well, I think it's the answer that works most, really. I mean, a lot of times we look for how do you say, the advanced courses before we do the simplest thing, which is often the hardest thing for us to do, because often the hardest thing, like of any kind of new thing, is getting started, you know, is that overcoming the initial inertia to new experiences is something that humans kind of struggle with. Well, except for a few odd birds, you know, that we mostly have a hard time doing that. So and I will, you brought up a good point, Leslie, about the chat. There are resources that Colby places in the chat, and there's you can download that to your computer directly, so you can go back later even and check out those resources. But yeah, that's one of the things that I find that's difficult, is when people are first starting, it can seem bewildering. But as you pointed out, you know, just before you ever get to the person who has some kind of let's say different reality that they're living in, just talking to people that you kind of know but don't really know, that's a start. And then people who are complete strangers, you know, and there's no shortage of strange people in South Dakota, you know, so we can it's easy to find strangers. So, but I want to turn back now to Tenyoh and her work. I think you had another example.
Yes, I do.
Okay, let's look at that example.
So
What can
this
you tell us about
second
this?
piece is, so 2 years had passed since Daisy's diagnosis with Alzheimer's, and I continue to visit her periodically. So in this piece, I portrayed an unforgettable moment I shared with her. Next, please. Daisy's memory has deteriorated. More than once, she got lost while walking her dog. Next. She could not tell when and where she had fallen, though bruises on her face told her family it was bad. Next. She stopped participating in any activities because her inability to follow instructions discouraged her. Next. She still enjoyed outings. One day, I took her to nearby woods. Next, we walked arm in arm, ensuring Daisy would not slip on the ice. Next, she first pointed out the sound of the stream, and then the sunlight filtering through pine trees, leaving elongated shadows on the snow. Breeze stroked our cheeks. Next, nature's language is truly universal. It can reach and soothes our depths no matter what conditions we are in. I felt the bliss, savoring the moment with Daisy. Next. By the time I experienced the above scene, Daisy was able to communicate only superficially, and I missed the heartfelt conversations I used to have with her. When I saw the sunlight with her that day, I felt she was cherishing the same thing. The feeling of connection made the moment so precious. It was a gift from Daisy to me. And Lawrence, my friend Carol here would like to share a story of the final gift that she received from her mother who passed away due to dementia.
Okay,
So,
Carol, you want to unmute your mic and turn on
I'm
your...
going to help her. Well,
Okay, great.
You can
Okay. Okay, so we'll just hold on a minute, and we're going to talk to someone with firsthand experience. You know, those are always youthful.
Before she pops on, I had a caregiver tell me once, and it stuck with me. She said, nothing teaches you how to be in the moment quite like dementia does. Because as a caregiver, she said, you don't have the past, you don't have the future, you have that exact moment that you're in. And I thought, it's such a neat way to look at it.
That's right. Sometimes I think that is the definition of being in the moment is, is dementia.
Yeah.
Carol, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. And
Yeah.
I was grateful to be able to be with my mother the last 5 months of her life. When she went into the nursing home in Hettinger, North Dakota, when I would go up there to visit her from Rapid City, she would say, "Did I do something?" Meaning, why am I here? I must have done something wrong. And it was almost like she felt like she was in jail. And I would say every time, "No, Mom, you have a disease. It can't be helped. It's okay." And she would relax. She was a very proper person all her life. And so I think that was a concern to her. I was the first one who could retire from job. And I retired from teaching English at Central High School in Rapid City and was able to get her out of the nursing home. One of the first things that I think I learned was I saw a bird on the railing out the window, and my mother loved birds, and I started to say, "Look, Mom." And then I thought, I don't even know if she could see it. Start there. Does she remember that she loved birds? So I stopped with the questioning thing. I was very fortunate to have hospice help. And there was a part of my mother, I think, that was there clear to the end because, she didn't want to get in the bathtub to get cleaned up. So the hospice person, and she didn't even want to get out of bed after a while. It didn't take long. She was in a wheelchair and then she didn't even want to leave bed. And the hospice person would help clean her in the bed and then get her clean clothes on her. And I think my mother decided when she would go because she was clean. I was with her, but I wasn't alone. And we had just finished putting her clean clothes on her. And the caregiver looked up and said to me, "She's gone." And it just seemed like it was a choice she made that. So there we are.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. While you're there, Carol, do any of the other folks on the Zoom call have any questions or things to share with Carol while she's on the call? Anything? Betty?
I just am remembering that I have had the experience of being present with people who were dying and being there at that moment. And it's unspeakably wonderful. So don't be afraid of it, just be there.
Mhm. Mhm. Interesting. Anyone else have something they would like to share while Carol's on? Well, Yoko, you had one more image
Yes, I do.
Okay, so let's take a look at those, at that one.
So years ago, I worked in a nursing home and I was a nursing student. And in this piece, I expressed what I had observed. Next, please. In a nursing home where I worked, residents had half an hour to eat a meal. Shane was one of the few who needed to be syringe fed. Next. One day, his wife visited, and we set his tray in a corner away from the cafeteria. Next. When she requested a spoon, I asked, "Does Shane open his mouth?" She answered, "Yes, he does, if you give him enough time." Next. The lunch ended, and the other residents were back in the bed for a nap. Next. Shane's wife was still spoon feeding him, restoring some dignity to the life of this old rancher.
Mhm.
This is an example of the gift of time that we could give to a loved one with living with dementia. And I heard like some caregivers that you are doing exactly that. So I share this story here.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit, Leslie, about this sense of time. You know, you were alluding to it before about, past, present, and future, but on a more microscopic or macro, how how does the both the person who's experiencing dementia as well and Alzheimer's, as well as those caring for them, how does time shift for them?
Yeah. Well, and I think, Tenyo hit on it so much. We talk about time a lot about in a lot of times in a practical way when we're talking to caregivers, because, when you have a lot on your plate and you still are doing maybe you're still working in your caregiving too. And so we want things done like we normally did. And that just goes out the window. That is not a thing anymore because people cannot be forced, like Shane, like she shared, if it takes them, their processing, it takes time to come around to it, just all the things. And so patience is something that we really do have to talk about with caregivers. And you're right, a whole new time frame, that former routine that they maybe had as husband, wife, mother, daughter, whatever it was, kind of goes out the window. So there's a new normal for that. I think time itself is we talk about time every week in this office, because when going back to the treatments, just for a second, one FDA approved a treatment, another one, just great news this week coming down the pike. And what those do in the early stages of the disease is give people more time. And right now we're talking about 8 months to a year of time, which to those of us, again, not living with dementia, that may not seem like a ton. But when you are impacted by this disease and knowing you can stay where you are for one more year or 8 months to see a grandbaby be born, to have a trip taken that you've always wanted to take, a wedding, what have you, that is everything to them. And I always couch it for people when I'm trying to talk about the work we're doing and the importance of time, the importance of these treatments and pushing forward. I say, think about someone you've lost and what you wouldn't do to have one more day with them. And now we're stringing together 8 months of days or a year of days. And so it definitely, that's all, when they come through our doors, that's all they want, right? They don't want their brain to change, but what they're really asking for is more time to stay like I am right now, or how I was a month ago. And so time is a huge issue for us and something that we're always trying to capture and hold on to for those we serve.
It occurs to me that, again, here's an example of how even if we are not connected to a person who needs that interaction with someone else, that support, that understanding these time shifts could be very beneficial in dealing with people who don't have a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's, because the more we talk about it, the more you can see that these are just gradations of something we all experience. I mean, we think about like forgetfulness or just not being aware of something. And I don't know that I've ever met a person who didn't ever forget anything. They may be out there, but I don't know. And I don't, the struggle that we have, I always think that, for me, if I don't have it already, if I get dementia, I probably won't be aware of it, because that was one of my main problems when I was a kid. I remember this story of my mother tying a string on my fingers so I wouldn't forget something. And then I got halfway down the road and threw off the string because I couldn't remember why that string was tied on my finger. So it's like, it just seems like these are opportunities for us to learn to get better interpersonal skills anyway.
Even as better humans, I would argue, because, I think about one of my guilty pleasures is to play this stupid game on my phone, and I tell myself, oh, it's just a little break. I'll do this 15 minutes before I make dinner or whatever. But sometimes or social media or whatever you're on that can literally suck time away. You look down, you look back up, and a half hour has passed, It doesn't matter what it is, if it's the TV, whatever, I just think there are things that pull us out of that consciousness, and time is ticking. I mean, you can talk to anyone. I feel it more than my 13-year-old feels it, that the seasons feel shorter, the years feel shorter, everything feels like it's speeding up. And so I think even as better humans, we can take a lesson from this and be more present, aware, really look your spouse in the eye when they're telling you a story rather than doing one of these. Yeah, I'm listening. I just think it's a challenge for us in these last few decades as we get pulled by so many things with actual computers in our hands all the time, and it's so easy to get sucked in. I'm guilty of it, but I do think it's a lesson that we can all learn.
Well, we're getting down to the final minute or two. Can you talk to us about, one, what we can do, and then two, where is the treatment for Alzheimer's? Where are we in the search for that?
Sure.
And with the idea that we only get to 11:30.
I know, I'm watching the clock. I'll be quick. I glossed over some of the services that we provide. And so I really would encourage people to give us a call at the office, go to alz.org. I'm not sure, Colby, if you could type in this phone number, it's the 24/7 helpline that I talked about, which is 800-272-3900, 800-272-3900. Again, they're master's level social workers just waiting to take your call. It's a great resource for our wide state that's all spread apart. The research has never been more exciting than it is right now. A researcher just told me recently that the science is on the trajectory of a hockey stick. That's how quickly they're learning from each other. We see news sometimes about failed clinical trials. The researchers are actually able to take the failed trial and change what they're doing midstream. And so we're just learning so quickly. Just a quick 101, it's a protein that gunks up the brain. These new drugs that we're seeing on the market right now clear that protein from the brain. That's why they're giving more time. It's not just the end-all treatments. You'll see commercials for Rexulti that are helping us deal with behaviors. We're just moving along better. It's fine. We're finally getting to something. And we're also looking at therapeutics and ways to make that caregiving journey easier for people too. So, there is lots of there are lots of ways to support this disease, but I feel strongly about the work we're doing. And so we appreciate that support to keep doing what we're doing so we can help more people.
Thank you both, Leslie and Tenyoh, for
Thank you very
joining
much.
us
Yes.
and bringing some information to us and helping us to have another connection, another human connection. Thanks, everybody. See you next week, same time, same station. Goodbye.